There we go. All right. Now, so that's kind of a little bit of a general rundown on librettists and composers and their relationship. And sometimes, of course, the composer and the librettist have a break and never speak to each other. And sometimes they don't speak to each other, don't even like each other, and yet they continue to collaborate. A good example of that is Gilbert and Sullivan, who really didn't necessarily like each other, but managed to create some really wonderful operettas. Okay, so sometimes my best thoughts come to me when I'm in the garden. And this last weekend, I was out in the garden cleaning things up, and I had an insight into the music, very specific examples of music from Carmen and Saint-Saëns et Dalila, which we listened to last week. And that is the similarity between two very important arias, one for each character. Both characters would have been recognized in the late 19th century as falling under the heading of femme fatale. That does not mean that they didn't have their own individuality. It's just that's how they would have been recognized by the audience. Now, the audience for Carmen, of course, was shocked by the fact that she was totally unrepentant in her way of life, that she spoke what she believed and maintained her independence much of the same in the same way that, as I explained to you earlier, Don Giovanni does. And he also shocked a lot of the audience, including Beethoven. But whereas Delilah is much more of a means to an end. She is a willing tool in the hands of her fellow Philistines in the undermining of the Israelite army through weakening their hero, Samson. But in both cases, these singers have a very clearly defining aria. And in the first case, in Carmen's case, it is the habanera. And in the case of Delilah, it is Mon cœur, my heart, her famous aria, my heart opens at the sound of your voice. And I noticed that both composers treat these themes very similarly. That is, it's a very chromatic, snaky sort of descending line. We get it right at the beginning in Carmen, in the habanera. Okay, get rid of that. Let's see, let's go to here and hear just the opening line. Now, did you hear how that sort of snaked its way down chromatically? Now, in the case of Delilah's aria, this chromatic line doesn't happen until partway through. So the first time she sings the opening words, the line is much more traditional and moves up and down. But in the place I'm going to play it, we can hear this sort of descending line like this. So I hope you could hear the similarity. Are they exactly the same? No, of course not. But they do, I think, illustrate something that the composer wants us to know about the character of the of this person. Now you have to keep in mind that Bizet and Saint-Saëns were classmates at the Paris Conservatoire. They were friends. while Samson and Delilah was written in the 1880s, which was almost a decade after Bizet died, I think it's highly likely that Saint-Saëns saw a performance of Carmen, maybe more than one. Could he have been influenced by how Bizet treated his character? I don't know, but I think it's worth entertaining. Sometimes, though, composers or other creative artists will get similar ideas at a similar time, and there's just something in the air, as we could say. So it's possible that there was an influence there of Bizet on Saint-Saëns. It's possible that Saint-Saëns thought of something similar on his own. I don't know, and I don't think we'll ever know, but I think it's interesting to listen to this and to hear this sort of similarity. It's not just a musical similarity, it's a similarity in how the music helps to delineate the character. And that's what opera composers do, after all. They're showing character, they're showing feelings, they're heightening action. They're doing all sorts of things through the music, how it surrounds the words. Sometimes in instrumental music, you get tremendous insight into character if you're listening carefully and know what you're listening for. So now we are going to start to listen and talk about one of the great composers of the 19th century or of any age, Giuseppe Verdi. He was part of probably the golden decade for composers in the 19th century, and that is the decade from 1803 through 1813. There were many of the great romantic composers of the early to mid to late 19th century were born in that decade. So we have Berlioz in 1803. We have Mendelssohn in 1809. We have Chopin and Schumann in 1810. We have Liszt in 1811. And then in 1813, we hit the operatic jackpot because it's the birth year of both Verdi and Wagner. Now, Verdi, unlike a lot of the others born in that decade, lived to be quite an old man. He lived all the way into the 20th century. He lived until 1901, unlike any of the others. He was by far the longest lived of any of these composers. Now, Verdi was a country boy. He grew up in La Roncale, which is a small town. And unlike a lot of other artists and other people who make their fortunes elsewhere in the big city, he was unashamed of his background. He really reveled in the fact that he had become an organist in the local church when he was in his early teens, and that he was sponsored to go off and study music. He never forgot where he came from, unlike Wagner, who was always running away from something because he owed people money or something or other. Verdi's, and I'll be honest about my prejudices right here. Morally speaking, Verdi and Wagner are very different, and I'll just leave it at that. Now, Verdi started writing operas in his 20s, and his first opera, Oberto, was well received. But then he hit an absolutely dreadful period. He lost his wife and his children to illness, and his second opera, a comedy called King for a Day, Un giorno di regno, was an absolute failure. It was savaged by the critics and by audiences alike. And Verdi never forgot that. And he vowed never to write another opera again. However, his publisher actually asked him to take a look at libretto that another composer had rejected. And Verdi took it home and apparently just threw it down on the table, grumbling about how nobody was going to make him go back to opera. And then he saw the words of one potential aria. And the words were va pensiero sull'ali dorate, go thoughts on golden wings. And he looked at those words and he said, I think I could do something with this. And so the opera Nabucco was born. And there is some evidence that Verdi thought of this opera about the exiled Israelites and how they have been enslaved by Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, and sent into exile. And there's some evidence that he thought of this as having a modern equivalent in his own Italians, who are, depending on the area of what we now think of as Italy, were either under the thumb of the French or the Austrians. And so he wrote this opera, and the Italian opera goers did not miss this parallel between the Hebrews and their own state. And so it became a very popular opera. And the opera, we're only going to hear this one aria. And this comes from the third act, where the Israelites have been captured and imprisoned in Babylon. And so the words, there's no translation on the screen that we're going to see, but it says, go thoughts on golden wings, go settle upon the slopes and hills, where warm and soft and fragrant are the breezes of our sweet native land. Greet the banks of the Jordan, the towers of Zion. Oh, my country, so beautiful and lost. Oh, so dear, yet unhappy. Oh, harp of the prophetic seers, why do you hang silent from the willows? Rekindle the memories within our hearts. Tell us about the time that have gone by, or similar to the fate of Solomon. Give a sound of lament, or let the Lord inspire a concert that may give us the ability to endure our suffering. So let's see here. Okay, there we go. All right, so I'm going to share my screen again. And there we go. Okay, so here we have a performance of Va Pensiero from Nabucco, as performed by the Met Opera Chorus in 2002. So this was one of his early operas. Um, During the 1840s, he wrote a number of operas, I Lombardi, Nabucco, and several others, and they were helping him to develop his craft as an opera composer. When we get to the 1850s, we start to, how shall I put this? We start to strike gold. Um, with, for instance, Rigoletto, which was in 1851, La Traviata, 1853, and then Il Trovatore, and then a number of other operas in what is called his middle period. Now, the story of Rigoletto is an interesting and in many ways disturbing one about a jester in the court of Mantua, and the um, one of the problems that Verdi faced often when he was at work on his operas was getting by the censors. The censors, whether they were French or Austrian, were extremely nervous about anything that might get the opera goers thinking about overthrowing the government and setting up a republic, which of course is what happened eventually. Um, and so they would often reject libretti based on what they thought of as revolutionary tendencies. And so Verdi had to change the story, even though he went to them and was willing to talk with them about it scene by scene. They rejected it. And so he had to change the location, put it in Mantua, which didn't have a king, and made him a duke and changed the time frame. He had to do a number of things to tone it down. He finally got approval. And so it's a story of the court jester, Rigoletto, who, after the death of his wife, has been raising his daughter, Gilda, in isolation, total isolation. She can't leave the house. And the reason for that is he's very afraid. He's seen what this court is like. He's seen how the courtiers, and particularly the Duke, are absolutely insatiable when it comes to women and have no compunction about going out and finding young girls from the lower classes and seducing them. And so he's terrified of Gilda, his daughter, being discovered. In the first act, the Duke has had his way with a young woman and has abandoned her, much to the chagrin of the father, who then gets arrested because he makes a big stink about this. And in a fit of helpless anger, this man curses both the Duke and Rigoletto, who had been in some ways doing his job, making fun of this man and making fun of the whole situation. And while the Duke manages to shake it off, Rigoletto is tormented by the fact that there is this curse hanging over him, because in those days, and certainly in this opera, people thought that curses carried a great deal of weight. So he returns home to find Gilda, and the two of them have a duet in which Gilda is trying to find out some things about her father, about her background and his background, about what he does all day. And she says, well, look, if you're not going to tell me about yourself, at least tell me who my mother was. And Rigoletto says, oh, don't torment me with this. She was a wonderful woman. She was an angel. And here I am, a hunchback. And I think she loved me out of compassion. And you are the only consolation that I have. You're all that is left to me. And I thank God for that. And Gilda is very touched by this. She says, what can have caused such bitter tears? Father, don't, no more, calm down. This sight tortures me. And she says, well, tell me what this sorrow is that's afflicting you. And he says, no, 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 it wouldn't do any good for me to talk about this. I'm your father. Let's let that alone. Perhaps some people fear me and some may even hate me. Others curse me. And she says, country, family, friends, have you none of these? And he says, my country, my family, my whole world is in you. And then she says, well, if I can make you happy, I'm content. And so we are going to see a duet with Željko Lucic and Diana Damrau from the Met singing this as soon as I share my screen again. Now, unbeknownst um, to Rigoletto, um, the courtiers have been watching him, and they've seen him go home, and they've seen him with a young woman, and they think that she is his mistress. And so they figure it would be great fun to abduct her. Little do any of them know that the Duke has actually managed to gain entrance to see her. He's seen her at church and he thinks, wow, she's cute. So, what happens in Act Two is that, or just at the end of Act One, is the courtiers, fool Rigoletto by telling him that they are trying to abduct another woman and they're there wearing masks. And he says, well, okay, I'll help you. Give me a mask too. Well, they not only mask him, they also blindfold him so he doesn't know what he's doing. And so he actually helps them to steal his own daughter. So as we come in on Act Two, the Duke is actually upset that Gilda has been abducted, because it means that he's not able to have his way with her. And then he recognizes when the courtiers say, hey, we've abducted Rigoletto's mistress. He recognizes that it's Gilda and he rushes off to see where she is. And so then Rigoletto realizes that what is going on, and he tells the courtiers that, you know, Gilda is my daughter, and he pleads with them to return her to him. And Gilda comes back in, and Rigoletto orders the courtiers to leave him alone with her. And when he finds out what has happened, he tries to console her, but he realizes that the curse is starting to take effect, and so he vows revenge on the Duke. But Gilda, at the end of the very end of the act, says, "No, please don't revenge yourself upon him because I love him." So when we get to Act Three, we get to meet Sparfucile, who is a professional assassin, and he and Rigoletto have already met, and he's asked Rigoletto whether he needs his services, and Rigoletto says, well, not now, but maybe. And so we get to hear probably the most famous aria in the entire opera. In the background, the Duke is singing La Donna è mobile, which is an aria that contains the height of irony because he is talking about how fickle and unfaithful women are, when in fact it is he who and many other men who are fickle and unfaithful. And the quick and dirty on this is that Rigoletto hires Sparfucile to kill the Duke. And what Sparfucile, his usual technique is to get his daughter to lure men into the house, and they are the intended victims, and she lures them in, and then Sparfucile does away with them. Once Maddalena, his daughter, finds out that it's the Duke that is the target, she pleads with her father not to kill him. And he says, okay, so the first person who shows up by midnight, I'll kill him instead. Well, it turns out that Gilda, trying to save her beloved Duke, disguises herself as a man, goes and gets killed and by Sparfucile, and then he hands the bag with her body to Rigoletto, and in the background we hear the Duke singing once more La Donna è mobile, and Rigoletto opens the sack and sees his daughter and says, he says the curse, la maledizione, the curse, and that's the end of the opera. So we're going to see the entire, just about all of the third act from film by, I think, who did this? Jean-Pierre Ponel. It was a film made in the 1970s, and we have Luciano Pavarotti, Dida Gruberova, and Ingvar Wixel playing Rigoletto himself. So here's Act 3, but before I put on Act 3, I'd better share my screen. There we are.
tempo a guarire t'ho lasciato.
Io l'amo.
Povero cor di donna, ai vile infame, ma ne avrai vendetta, o Gilda.
Pietà, mio padre.
E se tu certa fossi che ti tradisse, l'ameresti ancora?
Non so.
Egli?
Sì.
E ben osserva dunque.
Un uomo vedo.
Per poco attendi.
Ah, padre mio.
Due cose e tosto.
Quali?
Una stanza e del vino.
Son questi suoi costumi, o il bel zerbino?
La donna è mobile, qual piuma al vento, muta d'accento e di pensiero. Sempre un amabile, leggiadro viso, in pianto il riso e menzognero. La donna è mobile, qual piuma al vento, muta d'accento di pensier, di pensier, di pensier. È sempre misero chi a lei s'affila, chi le confila, mal cauto il core, pur mai non sentasi felice appieno chi in su quel seno non li va amore. La donna è mobile, qual più male vento, muta la pensier e di pensier
Vostruomo viver de o morire, più tardi tornerò l'opera compire.
Di se ben rammentami, o bella ti incontrai, mi piacque di te chiedere, e intesi che mi stai, or sappi che d'allora sol te quest'alma adora.
I vintolte ho preso, ne scorda forse adesso a un'aria signorino da pieno libertino.
Sì, un nostro sole,
un scelmi stordito,
il che fracassa,
stia saggio,
e tu si docile non farmi tanto piasso. Ogni saggezza chiudesi nelle gaudio e nell'amore. La bella mano candida,
scherzate voi signore,
non ho,
son brutta,
abbracciami, l'amore ardente,
signor l'indifferente, ti piace canzonar,
non ti può sposar,
e voglio la parola,
amabile figliuola,
E non ti basta ancor,
e voglio la parola,
e non ti basta ancor,
e voglio la parola,
e non ti basta ancor, e non ti basta ancor.
bella figlia dell'amore, schiavo son de vezzi tuoi, con un detto sole tu puoi le mie pene consolar. Vieni e senti del mio cuore il frequente palpitar, e con un detto sole tu puoi bene consolar.
rido bene cuore che dai male costa un po'. Così parlar d'amore, quanto valga il vostro gioco, me chiedete so apprezzar. Me pur le fame udire.
Taci, il piangere non va. Taci, il piangere non
Bella figlia
Veste viril che t'apprestai, e per Verona parti, sarò io pur doman.
Or venite.
Impossibil.
Tremo.
Ah. Venti scudi hai detto, eccone 10, e dopo l'opra il resto. E il cui rimane, sì, alla mezzanotte ritornerò.
Non cale a gettarlo nel fiume, basto io solo.
Oh no, il vo far io stesso.
Sia il suo nome.
Vuoi saper anche il mio? Egli è delitto, unizion son io.
La tempesta è vicina, più scura fia la notte.
Maddalena!
Aspettate, mio fratello viene.
Che importa?
Tuona.
E pioverà fra poco.
Tanto meglio! Tu dormirai in scuderia all'inferno ove vorrai!
Oh, grazie!
Oh, partite.
Con tal tempo!
Son 20 scudi d'oro. Ben felice d'offrirvi la mia stanza, se a voi piace, tosto a vederla andiamo.
Ebbene, sono con te, presto vediamo!
Povero Giovi, grazioso tanto. Dio, qual notte questa?
Si dorme all'aria aperta. Bene, bene. Buonanotte.
Signor, vi guardi Dio.
Breve sonno dormiam, stanco son io. La donna è mobile, qual più al vento, muta d'accento e di pensiero. Muta d'accento e di pensiero. La donna è mobile, muta d'accento e di pensiero. E di pensiero muta d'accento e di pensiero.
minuto.
Sì, 20 scudi ne dà di prodotto.
Solventi son pochi, valeva di più.
La spada si dorme. Va, portami giù.
A più non ragiono, amor mi trascina, mio padre perdono. Qual notte d'orrore, gran Dio che accadrà? Fratello, chi parla?
È il diavolo che va.
Somiglia a un Apollo, quel giovine, io l'amo e m'amo, riposi di più lo uccidiamo. Uccello!
Raddoppa quel sacco.
Perché?
Presso il tuo pollo scozzato da me, gettar dovrà il fiume.
L'inferno, qui vedo. Eppure il danaro, salvarti scommetto, servandoli in vita.
Difficile credo.
Ascolta, anzi facil ti svelo un progetto. Te scudi già 10 dal gobbo ne avesti. Venire con gli altri più tardi vedrai. Uccidi davanti, allora ne avrai. Così tutto il prezzo goder si potrà.
Uccide il quel corpo, che diavolo dicesti? Un ladro sal forse, sal forse bandito, quell'altro cliente da me fu tradito. Mi paga quest'uomo, fedele m'avrà.
Grazie per esso.
E tu a chi muoia?
Fu adesso buona figliuola.
Scudi perdiamo, lascia fare.
Salvarla dobbiamo.
Se per nel mezzo la notte toccato al punto che giunga per esso morrà.
E voi siamo tutti certo piatto, nessuno quest'ora da qui passerà. O qual tentazione, morire per ingrato, morire mio padre, o cielo
Ancor mezz'ora.
Attenti, fratello! Che piange dal donna Galo e darò lieta! Assegna il mio amore divennero bello, io vo per la sua accettare la mia vita! Si picchia! Si picchia, ti dico!
Strano, chi è? Quanto attendete?
Sospiccia che questo fa l'opera compita, anello una vita con alta salvar.
Ebbene, son pronto con l'uscio rischiude, più calco gli scudi, mi preme salvar.
Presso alla morte se giovi nessuno, ma c'è per quegli ambiti chi è che perdono.
spaventa lì l'aspetto di vivo sangue a lacrime piangendo sotto la barra del buffon. Quest'uscio è chiuso, ma non è tempo ancor. S'attenda. Qual notte di mistero, una tempesta in cielo, in terra un omicidio. Oh, come in vero, qui grande mi sento. Mezzanotte.
Chi è là?
Son io.
Sostate. Ecco è spento il vostro uomo.
Oh gioia, un lume.
Un lume? No, il danaro. Destri all'onda il gettiam.
No, basta solo.
Come vi piace, qui menato il sito, più ampio e più profondo il gorgo, presto che alcun non vi sorprenda. Buona notte.
E là, orto, ma sì, vorrei vederlo. Ma che importa? E ben desso, e coi suoi sproni, ora mi guardo mondo. Questo è un buffone, e non potente è questo. Ei sta sotto i miei piedi, ed esso con noia. E giunta al fine la tua vendetta oduola, sia l'onda a lui sepolcro, un satto il suo lenzuolo. All'onda, all'onda.
L'onda è nobile, qual più al letto, muta l'accetto, e di pensiero. Sempre amabile, leggiadro viso, il piacere viso.
Notturna è questa.
La donna è nobile, qual più malamente,
No!
muta
No!
l'accetto,
Egli adesso, maledizione, ormai di non antico. Chi è mai? Chi è qui? Sua vece? Io tremo. E umano corpo. Mia figlia! Io, mia figlia! Ah no! È impossibile! Per Verona in via fu vision ed essa fanciulla, a me rispondi, l'assassino mi svela. E su, mia figlia, mia Gilda, o mia figlia.
Chi mi chiama?
Ella parla, si muove, è viva, oh Dio, mia ben solo in terra, mi guarda, mi conosci.
Madre mia!
Quante che fu, sei tu perita, dimmi.
Lacciare! Mi piago.
Chi t'ha colpita?
Ho ingannato, colpevole fui. L'uomo è troppo, ora muoio per lui.
Dio tremendo, è la stessa dallo stral di mia giusta vendetta. Angel caro, mi guarda, m'ascolta, parlami, figlia di letto. Se ti ne muori, i soldi mai, non morire o qui pecco. lasciarmi onde. Gilda, mia Gilda, è morta! Ah, la maledizione!
And thus ends Rigoletto. A couple of things. First, my apologies for the subtitles. They were sometimes a little bit iffy, but I think you got the idea of what was going on. And of course, I misspoke when I said that Maddalena was Sparafucili's daughter. She's his sister. It's interesting. You can see that Verdi, in a lot of ways, is still learning his craft because the death of Gilda is so drawn out, and he gets to the point a lot sooner in later operas. But one thing to note is when she's singing about heaven, you hear this high flute and going up and down, and that's something that apparently was important to Verdi as a way of symbolizing heaven, because you hear it in some portions of his Requiem, which he wrote 20 years later. So the next year, 1852, Verdi, accompanied by his companion, the soprano Giuseppina Strepponi, who was later his wife, went to Paris and they saw a play, La Dame aux Camélias, of The Lady of the Camellias by Alexandre Dumas fils. That is, there were two Dumas who were writers. One was the father and one was the son. This was the son. And Verdi liked this story very much, and so he decided to set it. It's about Violetta Valery, who is a courtesan and who wins the love of a young man, and of course, then given that this is Verdi with his how shall I put it, I think he had kind of a depressive personality. He couldn't stand having anything really work out very well. So in any case, this young man, Alfredo Chermont, falls in love with Violetta at a party, and they sing this aria together. It's a drinking song. At first, the Baron Dufault, who is her lover at the moment, is offered the chance to sing, and he declines, and so Alfredo is sort of forced forward, and he sings this song about the joys of having a cup of wine in company. So let me share my screen, and then this is the Glyndebourne Opera doing this, and there is the Brindisi, or the drinking song.
Poiché quello che al cuore onnipotente va, viviamo, amore, amor, tra i calici, piccoli baci avrà.
And I've got to say that Verdi is really the king of the operatic waltz. So La Donna Immobile is a waltz. This is a waltz. He's also pretty good at writing drinking songs because there's another famous one that's also in 3/4 that's in Otello later. So Violetta has a secret. She's dying of tuberculosis, or as it was told and called in those days, consumption. And after Alfredo declares his love and leaves, she weighs whether she should really be with him or not. And she decides, no, I have to stay free. And she sings about that. But in the background, we can hear Alfredo leaving and singing about love. And we can tell it's not long before she succumbs. And here we get to hear this wonderful oh, go away. Sorry, I've got to, there we go. Okay. She sings sempre libera, always, forever free, I have to stay free. And so here is Renee Fleming singing this wonderful aria.
Sempre libera di Dio, vogliare di gioia in gioia, o che scorre viver mio per i sentieri del batter, nascondiamo giorno moia, sempre viva di
Sorry, I thought it was done. I kept cutting it off a little bit early. I think that Renee Fleming does a magnificent job there of portraying the desperation towards gaiety that a woman who knows that she is dying has. It turns out that she is very much in love with Alfredo, and they begin to. And as he's about to go off to Paris to make arrangements for them to make things more permanent, he goes off and his father comes to see not him, but her. And the elder Germont says, you know, your arrangement is really making things impossible for my daughter. She's this wonderful, pure being, and she's now being tarnished by association because her brother is living with you, a fallen woman. And that's, of course, what La Traviata means, the lost one. And I beg of you, her marriage she's engaged, but her fiance is threatening to call this off. And I beg of you to please stop seeing my son so that this pure flower can go on to happiness. She's really my greatest treasure. And eventually Violetta agrees. And in a really heartbreaking aria, which we're not going to listen to, she says, all right, tell this pure flower what someone had to give up for her to have happiness. And so she writes a farewell note to Alfredo. And Alfredo actually gets it when he's at home. And he's dreadfully upset. His father tries to console him and says, you know, think about your family, think about your native area and everything. But Alfredo is both hurt and disgusted by what he sees as a betrayal. And in the next act, he calls out Violetta at a party and insults her in public. And his father actually comes to her and says that was unconscionable, you know, to do this to this woman who has actually done this only because I asked her to do it, and who sacrificed her love to you. And so we come to the end of the opera, and she's definitely dying. And the elder Germont finds out about this, and he writes to her and says, my son is coming to be by your side, to help you to get better. And she is there, and she says, it's too late for me. And she has this scene where ordinarily she would be singing, but Verdi instructs her to actually speak. She's looking at this letter rather than sing. And this is quite a revolutionary idea. He does it also in Macbeth. To have the singer give up this opportunity to sing for the sake of the drama. In comic opera, of course, people spoke lines all the time, but to have a very charged scene, have this text be spoken is very, very dramatic. And once again, we'll see Renee Fleming doing this. Sharing screen. Okay, so it's hard with this. There we go. Addio del passato, that is farewell to all the scenes of my happiness.
Celeste la promessa, la disfida ebbe luogo. Il barone fu ferito, però migliora. Alfredo è in strano suono. Il vostro sacrificio io stesso gli ho svelato. Egli a voi tornerà nel suo perdono. Io pur verrò. Curatevi.
You can hear in the violin solo what Alfredo was singing in the background in the last excerpt that we heard. And then we come to her final scene. Alfredo is there, the doctor is there, and it's extremely touching.
Prendi
She says, I feel better.
cessarono
I feel better.
gli spasmi del dolore
Pain is all
in
gone.
me. Rinacque, rinacque,
Smile, smile.
pallido, insulto, dico, ah, Mario,
And, you know, her last word is joy. And then she collapses. There's a very interesting interview with Renee Fleming that I've put on your class summary at the bottom, in which she discusses this role with the music director of the and she says it took her years to be able to sing this role, because she said for many people they have to sing it early because it's quite a high role and quite difficult. She had to wait because her voice was too dark at the beginning of her career, and she also had to grow into the role. So it's a very interesting interview. It's well worth seeing. So you can see in 2 years he's already worked hard at his craft to make that death scene less drawn out than in Rigoletto. Now it's intense and it's short and to the point, and it's like getting a punch in the gut. As far as I'm concerned, it's so powerful. And it was a subject that the subject of what was called the demi-monde, that is this sort of limbo in which these high-class courtesans live, that once they got to a certain age they were discarded, and then what happened to them? Well, they fell into poverty. And he wanted to write an opera about this, but the censors did such a job cutting it to bits that it took him quite a while to be able to get to the story. So these two are operas from his middle period. Next week, in what is, I'm afraid, a much too truncated journey through Verdi's masterpieces, we'll get to listen to some of his later works. So until then, I hope you have a wonderful week, and I'll see you all next Tuesday. Bye-bye.